The question of whether Christianity borrowed elements from earlier religious traditions is a topic of debate among scholars, historians, and theologians. Some argue that there are similarities between certain aspects of Christianity and earlier mythologies, such as those of Hinduism or ancient Egyptian religion, while others contend that these similarities are either coincidental or misinterpretations. The concept of death and resurrection is indeed present in various mythologies and religions throughout history, including Hinduism, Egyptian mythology, with figures like Osiris and Horus, and others. In Christianity, the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ are central tenets of the faith, symbolizing redemption, salvation, and the triumph over death. However, while there may be parallels in certain themes or motifs, attributing direct plagiarism or copying can be complex and speculative. Religions often evolve over time, influenced by cultural exchanges, interconnections, and reinterpretations. Additionally, scholars note that the contexts, teachings, and theological significance of these narratives differ significantly across traditions. Ultimately, the question of influence and borrowing in religious history is multifaceted and may not have a definitive answer. It's essential to approach these discussions with nuance, acknowledging both the similarities and distinctions between religious traditions and recognizing the complexity of cultural and historical dynamics. The Gospels provide different accounts of the disciples' actions during the crucifixion of Jesus. According to the New Testament, most of the disciples fled or went into hiding during the crucifixion, likely out of fear for their own safety and concern for their lives. One reason for their fear and flight could be the intense persecution and opposition faced by Jesus and his followers from religious authorities and Roman authorities. Jesus' arrest and crucifixion were orchestrated by Jewish religious leaders who viewed him as a threat to their authority, and by Roman officials who saw him as a potential revolutionary figure. Given the violent and brutal nature of crucifixion as a form of execution, it's understandable that the disciples would have been terrified and sought to distance themselves from the events unfolding. Another factor could be the emotional and psychological turmoil they experienced witnessing the crucifixion of their beloved teacher and leader. Seeing Jesus suffer such a fate may have caused them to feel overwhelmed, confused, and powerless. It's also worth noting that the Gospels portray Peter, one of Jesus' closest disciples, as following him to the place of crucifixion, but then denying knowing him 3 times out of fear for his own safety. Matthew 26, 69-75, Mark 14, 66-72, Luke 22, 54-62, John 18, 15-27. After the crucifixion, the disciples' fear and despair are evident in the gospel accounts. However, their fear would eventually be transformed into courage and conviction following the resurrection of Jesus, as they became bold witnesses of the Christian faith despite facing further persecution and hardship. The theory that someone other than Jesus was crucified in his place, such as Simon of Cyrene, while Jesus escaped, contradicts the historical accounts provided in the Gospels and is not supported by mainstream Christian scholarship or historical evidence. The Gospels unanimously depict Jesus being crucified, with details such as his trial before Pontius Pilate, the mocking by soldiers, the carrying of the cross, and the crucifixion itself. There is no indication in the biblical accounts that someone else was crucified in Jesus' place, and the identity of the crucified person is consistently described as Jesus of Nazareth. Additionally, the fleeing of the disciples during the crucifixion does not necessarily imply that they doubted Jesus' identity or believed someone else was crucified in his place. Their fear and fleeing can be more plausibly attributed to the intense emotional and psychological turmoil they experienced witnessing the crucifixion of their teacher and the threat of persecution they faced as his followers, as previously discussed. The theory that Jesus escaped crucifixion contradicts the core beliefs of Christianity, which hold that Jesus willingly gave himself up to be crucified as part of God's plan for the redemption of humanity, and that he was subsequently resurrected from the dead. This belief is foundational to Christian faith and is attested to not only in the New Testament, but also in early Christian writings and historical records outside of the Bible. The denial of Jesus by Peter, as recorded in the Gospels, is a well-known episode in Christian tradition. According to the biblical accounts, Peter denied knowing Jesus 3 times in the courtyard of the high priest during Jesus' trial before his crucifixion, Matthew 26:69-75, Mark 14:66-72, Luke 22:54-2, John 15-27. Peter's denial of Jesus is typically interpreted within the context of his fear and uncertainty in the face of impending danger and persecution. Despite his earlier declarations of loyalty to Jesus, Peter's denial underscores his human weakness and the intensity of the situation. The fact that Peter denied knowing Jesus does not necessarily imply that the person on the cross was someone other than Jesus. Peter's denial reflects his own fear for his safety and his struggle to reconcile his loyalty to Jesus with the immediate danger he faced. It does not change the historical consensus regarding Jesus' crucifixion as recorded in the Gospels and affirmed by Christian tradition. Furthermore, the Gospels consistently identify the person who was crucified as Jesus of Nazareth, and there is no indication in the biblical accounts that someone else was substituted for him. The denial of Jesus by Peter and the other disciples is part of the broader narrative of Jesus' passion and crucifixion, and does not provide evidence for an alternate interpretation of these events. The Quran presents a different perspective on the crucifixion of Jesus than that found in the New Testament. In Islamic belief, the Quran states that Jesus was not crucified, but rather it was made to appear so. Quran 4, verse 157. The precise interpretation of this verse varies among Islamic scholars and commentators, but it is generally understood to mean that while Jesus was not crucified, someone else was made to resemble him, either Simon of Cyrene or Judas Iscariot. Islamic tradition teaches that God has the power to perform miracles, and this verse is often understood in that context. The Quranic account emphasizes that God's plans are beyond human understanding, and that he has the power to protect his prophets and messengers from harm. It's important to note that this perspective on the crucifixion of Jesus diverges from the beliefs of Christianity, which hold that Jesus was indeed crucified and subsequently resurrected. The differences in belief between Islam and Christianity regarding the crucifixion of Jesus have been a subject of theological debate and discussion for centuries. Ultimately, interpretations of religious texts like the Quran and the Bible can vary among different communities and individuals, shaped by theological, cultural, and historical factors.